Have you ever wondered how a sudden windfall of natural resources could sometimes hurt rather than help a country? It sounds counterintuitive, right? After all, more resources should mean more wealth and prosperity. But in economics, there's a phenomenon that perfectly captures this paradox, and it's called the Dutch disease. Today, we're going to explore what it is, how it started, and why it continues to challenge countries rich in natural resources. By the end, you might even start looking at sudden wealth in a whole new way. So what exactly is Dutch disease? Simply put, it occurs when a country discovers or begins exporting large amounts of natural resources, like oil, natural gas, or minerals, and the resulting wealth unintentionally undermines other sectors of its economy. Initially, the country seems to thrive. Revenues surge, living standards rise, and the nation feels richer than ever. But this sudden prosperity can have a dark side. Over time, it may weaken manufacturing, discourage diversification, and create long-term economic instability. Let's go back in history for a moment. The term Dutch disease actually originates from the Netherlands in the 1960s. At that time, the country discovered massive natural gas reserves in the North Sea. This discovery was a game changer. Foreign currency started flowing into the Netherlands at an unprecedented pace, and the Dutch guilder began to appreciate rapidly. On the surface, this was fantastic news. The country seemed wealthier overnight. But here's where the problem started. A stronger currency made Dutch manufactured goods more expensive abroad, reducing exports. Factories struggled to compete with foreign producers, and industries that had nothing to do with natural gas began to falter. Essentially, the newfound resource wealth was inadvertently crowding out traditional sectors of the economy. Imagine suddenly having so much money that your local baker can't compete because importing bread is now cheaper. That's the kind of imbalance Dutch disease creates. The Netherlands had unwittingly created the first textbook example of a scenario where sudden resource wealth destabilizes a broader economy. But the Netherlands isn't the only country to face this challenge. Think of Venezuela, a nation once praised for its abundant oil reserves. Under leaders like Hugo Chavez, the country relied heavily on oil revenues to fund social programs and boost living standards. For a time it worked. Venezuela's GDP grew, and per capita income rose significantly. Yet the economy became dependent on oil. Manufacturing and agriculture lagged, imports surged, and when oil prices fell, the nation plunged into crisis. By 2018, hyperinflation reached astronomical levels, GDP had collapsed, and widespread shortages left millions struggling. A sudden resource boom, without proper economic planning, had turned into a long-term disaster. So what's happening behind the scenes in these economies? When natural resource exports bring in foreign currency, the local currency appreciates. That's good in some ways. It makes imports cheaper. But it also makes domestic products more expensive for foreign buyers, hitting exporters hard. Meanwhile, investment shifts toward the booming resource sector, leaving traditional industries underfunded. Employment opportunities shrink in these neglected sectors, increasing unemployment. Essentially, the economy becomes unbalanced, overly reliant on a single resource, and vulnerable to market fluctuations. And Dutch disease isn't just about oil or gas. Any sudden surge of revenue, whether from rare commodities like coffee, cocoa, or even from massive foreign investments, can trigger similar effects. Take Colombia in the 1970s, for instance. A global coffee shortage caused prices to spike, and Colombia increased production massively. Revenues soared, but the peso appreciated sharply. Other sectors received less attention, production declined, and imports surged to fill the gap, mirroring the Dutch disease pattern. Even non-resource sectors can experience it if sudden financial inflows distort the economy. Isn't it fascinating how an economic boom can be so dangerous if not managed properly? Now here's a question for you. Can you imagine your own country suddenly discovering a huge resource like oil or gold? What would happen to the businesses and jobs you rely on every day? Would manufacturing and small businesses suffer as a result? This thought experiment helps illustrate why Dutch disease is such a critical topic in economics. So, can countries escape Dutch disease? Absolutely, but it requires careful planning and disciplined governance. Resource wealth must be managed wisely through sovereign wealth funds, long-term investments, and policies encouraging diversification. Countries need to invest in education, technology, and infrastructure so that multiple sectors thrive simultaneously. The Netherlands, for example, corrected course by investing in agriculture and technological innovation, ultimately becoming a global export leader in areas far beyond natural gas. This shows that careful long-term thinking can turn a potential crisis into an opportunity for sustainable growth. In contrast, nations that fail to diversify face severe consequences. Venezuela's over-reliance on oil left its economy exposed. And today, recovery is slow and uncertain. Hyperinflation, high unemployment, and social unrest are direct results of an economy that never balanced the benefits of resource wealth with sustainable growth. It's a stark reminder that prosperity from natural resources is not automatically permanent. It's what governments do with that wealth that determines long-term success. Dutch disease highlights an important lesson. Wealth can be both a blessing and a curse. Resource windfalls create enormous potential, but without strategic management, they can destabilize economies and reduce overall welfare. And this is not just about oil. Think of countries dependent on rare minerals, agricultural exports, or even sudden tech booms. Any sector that dominates too quickly without balance can inadvertently weaken the rest of the economy. Here's another question for you. Do you see modern economies today that might be at risk? Could sudden surges in tech, foreign investment, or commodities trigger a similar imbalance? It's not just hypothetical. Consider how some countries' dependence on a single export, whether oil, rare minerals, or agricultural products, makes them vulnerable to price swings or global shocks. Dutch disease is essentially a warning sign for the modern global economy. Ultimately, the key to avoiding this economic illness lies in diversification, careful fiscal policy, and long-term thinking. Countries that balance natural resource wealth with sustainable development avoid the pitfalls of sudden prosperity, creating stable, resilient economies. History, from the Netherlands to Venezuela and even Colombia, offers a roadmap. Manage wealth wisely, invest in multiple sectors, and ensure that growth benefits the whole society. That's the true cure for Dutch disease, a lesson that remains incredibly relevant in our fast-changing global economy. Finally, think about this. What if your country discovered a resource tomorrow that could instantly make it rich? Would leaders focus on short-term gains, or would they plan carefully for decades to come? Dutch disease reminds us that true economic prosperity isn't just about wealth. It's about balance, foresight, and ensuring that every sector of society benefits. It's a challenge for policymakers, economists, and citizens alike, and one that will continue to shape the economic future of resource-rich nations around the world.